Hello, this is our sixth lecture in 412, Essay Writing 7th term. This time we talk about narrative. How we write a narrative, of course not as a story or as fiction. We write narrative within the essay writing. But in order to talk about narrative, we need to know that there are a number of discourse types. We have been focusing on only one. We talked about the argument. We need to see what the argument is very quickly and then compare this to the narrative telling the story. So we need to compare. We talk about narrative today. This is our issue. But before we do this, compare the rhetorical modes. We need to know this expression, rhetorical modes, or types of discourse, the types of writing. The first type we dealt with was the argument. Now, so quickly again, we see what the argument is. When we wrote an argument, we wrote essays like these. First, a paragraph like this, ending with the, we should ban the use of the private car in the center of the city. This is an argument because this is a point of view. We should ban, we prevent the use of the private car in the center of the city. Of course, the dots here means we introduce the subject. We talk about the time, the place, the background, the importance of my subject. Then I end my first paragraph by a thesis, writing what we believe in. This thesis is written very well, and usually it's in the present tense. We should ban the use of private cars. It means now. Now this is about the point of view I want to prove that it should be there. Then I write paragraphs like this. We talk about traffic. The first reason why we should ban the car is the traffic jams. There are so many cars and the streets are blocked. Then, of course, if this is a noun, we use a verb, then people, then a verb. For example, subject and verb. We write grammatical English. Then we move to another paragraph. We talk about pollution. Pollution is the second piece of evidence why we should ban the use of the private car in the middle of the city. Of course, we'll talk about pollution here in the first sentence, the topic statement, and then we give explanation and examples. Then we use economy as another piece of evidence. At the end, we say, therefore, then we say we should ban the use of the private cars. We use capital letters at the beginning. Now, back again, this is an essay of argument. That's what we've been doing all the time. Writing arguments, points of view, like banning the cars here in the present tense and saying why, 1 point traffic, another pollution, a third economy. Then, therefore, we write the thesis again. Let's move on to another type of writing. Look at this one. Narrative, and this is our point today, writing a story. But we'll say more about it in a second. First, let's see an example. How is a narrative? For example, 2 years ago, I received a letter informing me of the sickness of my uncle. I always had a profound respect for him. He was the mentor who always guided me. And then I carry on. The first thing that strikes the eye here is using ago. We are talking about the past. Then I said I received. Then we go on like this. I had respect for him. He guided me. He was my mentor. Now everything is in the past because we are telling a story. A narrative is telling a story. But we'll see now the essay goes on. I was so busy with the installing of the new system in the office. Then we continue, another sentence with a verb. I could not, past tense was, could not, past. I could not do this and that. I kept promising myself I would go. When I refer to the future, in the past I use would. I can't say I kept and then I say I will. Because if I translate from Arabic, I may make this kind of mistake. In English, there is concordance of tenses like these, and there are varieties of tenses that we don't find in Arabic. In English, I keep the same kind of tense here because I start with the past tense. This can't be other than would. From the beginning again, this is a narrative telling a story. Everything is in the past. Paragraph 1 prepares the story saying about the letter I received about the uncle I loved very much. The second one, the development of the events where I say I was busy at the office and I kept promising myself I will go visit him very soon. Then I did this and I did that. I keep telling the story in the past. Then consequently what happened, I tell here. Then we come to another paragraph. One gloomy morning, the terrible news arrived. Of course, we can write more and more and more. These are only parts of a short essay. He passed away. He died. Then we talk about that. We move on. The story is finished up till here. If we count the paragraphs, at least we find a first paragraph where I have the setting, the time and place and the background of the story, the characters of that story, my uncle, my relationship with that uncle, and receiving the letter about his sickness. Then in the middle here, I have the development of events. I was so busy I couldn't go and visit him. And then what happened is that I received a letter of his passing away. Now it's finished. This is the end. It happened. Then maybe I say, we get so busy. Here, this is a commentary on the story in the past, in the present tense. We get so busy that we do not stop for a moment and ponder the meaning of it all. We lose the best in life without knowing it. Why didn't I visit him, comfort him in his last moments, my mentor, my friend? Why hadn't I told him before how much he meant to me? It's always too late. The tenses used are all past tense. When I use didn't, of course, it has to be in the past. Visit is the infinitive coming after did, but everything is in the past, unless I'm making a commentary like saying, we get so busy. So this is a commentary. Now, when I come to this one, why hadn't I told him? I use the past perfect because I'm saying, I'm telling about a past event that took place before another past event. So within the past tenses, I have to keep this kind of idea, the concordance of tenses, the sequence of tenses, and everything that has to do with the past. The last sentence says, it is always too late, because this is commentary. Now, if I take the story from beginning to end, and we say this is a sample of writing on the narrative, we say the narrative should be like that. The narrative is a story, but we use it in order to tell something about what happened firsthand in my experience or the experience of people around me. It is a story, a true story, that I write in order to tell people something, to teach them a lesson. Our narrative here is simply a story, but we are not writing like Ernest Hemingway or like Naguib Mahfouz. We are not writing story that's written for itself. The value of the story is the story itself, that has entertainment and has lots of meanings, and of course it has also a moral or education, but is not written to educate us. Here we are writing an essay that's meant to send a message, to teach people something that's direct, that's not a work of art. The story we are using is meant to be as a means for an end. The end is the moral I'm going to tell people. This is not fiction, this is using the method of telling fiction, the method of telling the story in order to write my essay. That's why in my essay here I see the present tense as well, because I'm not telling a story for the story itself. I'm telling the story because I want to teach people something. What we learn from the story that we read here, we read only excerpts of the story, parts of it, is that a person says that sometimes we have something that's very valuable and then we lose this thing. We only know the value of that thing when we lose it. Or maybe it's more than that, it's about people. We have people that we are interested in, relatives or friends, and then we know their value, but we're too busy to see them, for example, or talk to them or so, and then we lose them and we feel the loss after it is impossible to do anything about it. The writer here is telling us something about this kind of feeling that he had for an uncle, and it applies to uncles or other people. The story is made in this way, 3 parts. The first part of the story telling us about the relationship with the uncle, and that there is an uncle and that he is sick. This is the setting. We know about the lines of the story, about me, about my uncle, about the sickness, these lines that will make the story. This is the beginning. It may be also the time and place of the story. It's written in 1 paragraph. It could be 2 or 3 paragraphs, but it is 1 section, the beginning of the story. The writer is telling this in the past tense or the past tenses, and there are a number of them. Then the writer moves on to how things develop. The writer moves into the middle of the story. In the middle of the story, things develop that the sickness on one side is aggravated, is becoming worse and worse, and that I am on the other side becoming more busy and not thinking of my uncle while I should have. I keep postponing. This is the complication. The lines, I should do something, but I don't do it. And things are getting worse and worse because I'm more busy. I'm not going to go and see my uncle, and he's dying. Then we come to the end where the solution is, where the entanglement is not there anymore. The complication is not there. Things are done, are finished, the end. The uncle died, now it's impossible to go and see him. Now we read these 3 paragraphs or 3 sections because every part of these can be done in a number of paragraphs. And then we learn something. We learn that we forget about the things we have. We forget to know, to appreciate the things we have until we lose them. We learned this from the manner of telling the story, and we know that the writer is not writing a story like this in order to entertain us. And that's why this writer has in the final paragraph some kind of commentary, like we forget about that in the present tense. Now, this is a narrative. That's a piece of writing with a purpose. It looks like an argument, and it is an argument. A narrative is not simply a story for the story's sake. It has a purpose, it has a message, and that's why we can say also that it is an argument, or there is an argument involved, the idea behind it. Now we see more and more so we can learn. Let's see another point or another example, and we have this a lot in our book. There is a story called The Little Girl, and we need to write this story again. It's a story by Catherine Mansfield. I'll take the idea of the story and just turn it into the basic 3 points of a story. I oversimplify the story really very much. The Little Girl, I can write it in this manner. It's The Little Girl, the title. Originally it's a story by Catherine Mansfield, and then I'll turn this to an oversimplified structure to see that there are 3 basic units. Now we have a paragraph here which starts with at the beginning. This is an adverbial at the beginning of the sentence. The sentence starts with the subject, the little girl. I need to add a verb here and to make a sentence, but we see that one section of writing is writing this thing, the beginning. So at the beginning, we move on to another section as things developed, which means in the middle, she did what? Add a verb. Then at the end, the little girl did what? Again, we need a subject, we need a verb here to complete it. Now, I'll come back to this kind of diagram to show that we are not reading only words, we are reading structures. There is the beginning of the story and what the little girl did or felt. We have the middle of the story. You don't have to say in the middle, but things have developed, moved on. What did she do? Then at the end, what happened? There are 3 basic elements to any story. Let's see a few lines from the beginning. The little girl, this is the actual story, but we're not going to read it all. We'll read just one short paragraph, and then we can read the rest. Look up the story. It's very easy to go to the internet and look up The Little Girl by Catherine Mansfield. Catherine Mansfield, who was born in 1888 and died in 1923, wrote this short story, and let's see how we can understand that. To the little girl, he was a figure to be feared and avoided. Every morning, before going to business, he came into the nursery and gave her a perfunctory kiss, to which she responded with the "Goodbye, father," and oh, the glad sense of relief when she heard the noise of the buggy growing fainter and fainter down the long road. First, this is an actual story, it's not an essay, but we read this one to learn how stories are written. To start with, this is paragraph 1, that is the setting, telling us that we are going to talk about a little girl. And then we're talking about the father of the little girl. These are the 2 lines. And this story mentions other persons on the fly, very quickly, and we don't know very much about them, but we know much about the little girl and the father. This is the beginning of the story, where we have the 2 lines of the girl and the father, and we see how there is some kind of difference between them. The girl is afraid of her father. When the father leaves her, she says, oh, she has the glad sense of relief. She was afraid of him. She doesn't really like him very much. She thinks that he is very harsh. When he kisses her, it's a perfunctory kiss, which is a matter of habit. At the beginning also we say to the little girl, he here refers to the father. He was a figure to be feared and avoided. Now, from paragraph 1, we understand this is the beginning of the story, where we have the girl and her father, and the feelings at the beginning of the story. The feelings of the girl was that she avoided her father. She didn't like him very much. Now, again, this is a story because everything is in the past. She feared him, past tense, avoided him, and before he went to business, he came to her room. He gave her a kiss, to which she responded, and the sense of relief when she heard, the past tense, the noise of buggy growing fainter and fainter down to the road going back. So here we have to see the concordance of tenses. We're telling a story, we have only past tenses. We say, look up the story, but if we take this meaning and we go back to the structure, we can say here, in this structure, at the beginning of the story, the little girl feared her father. She did not know anything about his feelings, and so she thought that he was very harsh, and he dealt with her as a matter of fact. Now, this is the beginning. We will discover as things developed, there was a clash between her and her father when she tore up some of his papers, and he beat her, and she cried, and she hated her father for that. Then, at the end, what happened? At the end, she was with her father, and he took good care of her. She was afraid. He carried her gently, he put her in bed. He kept patting her, and then she felt that he was very kind. She was lying on his chest, and she felt his heart beating, and she said, he has this kind heart. There was a change here. At the beginning, there was this fear of the father, and in the middle, this fear grew more and more. It became even almost hatred. Then at the end, she discovered the reality of the heart behind this surface. The surface is very harsh, but the heart is really kind. At the end, she discovered the reality of that, and that her father really loved her, and appearances do deceive us. Now, the story is not written in 3 paragraphs. It's written in something like 20 paragraphs or so, but these are the 3 sections. If we understand these 3 sections, we can write stories similar to them, and we try to make the story teach us a lesson. Now, we need to read the Catherine Mansfield one. We don't have this in the book, but we can look it up and read the short story, and read many others. We learn English, we learn ideas, we learn how to use the past tense all through. And this is a technicality, again, that we need to learn as writers. This is fiction and creative writing. The one written by Mansfield is fiction. This is literary work. It's imagination. It's not like the essay writing we write. But we learn the tenses, we learn the idea of the 3 parts of the story from this writing. It is fiction, which means it is creative writing, meant for itself. That's art. In essay writing, the writer uses the narrative to imply an argument. We're going to do similar things, write stories like these, but not for themselves. We're going to imply an argument, which means we'll not say the argument directly, but the argument will be understood. Let's see how writers do that. We need other examples. Now, this example is taken from the book, so the students can read it in full in their book. Here we have only a mention of a few points, only 1 paragraph. Let's see, this is an essay by George Orwell in the format of an essay, of a story, a short story. It's page 53, and we read this and we go on. But let's see 1 paragraph. It starts like this. George Orwell's story. In the book, it's like a hanging, or the title is a hanging. It reads, "It was in Burma, a sudden morning of the rains, a sickly light, like yellow tinfoil, was slanting over the high walls into the jail yard." Reading this sentence, or these 2 sentences, we learn first that we're told about the place. The writer should always tell us about the place, the time, the characters, the background, so we can understand the main line in the story. It is in Burma, and we learn later on that the writer here is a British writer, and he was an officer in the British Army in Burma. At that time, Burma was under the British colonialism, so this will have a meaning. So it was in Burma, and it was a sudden morning of the rain. It was raining, but the writer does not simply say it was raining. He says it was a sudden morning of the rain. So the feeling here is not a good feeling. He feels something is bad, is ugly. And why? Let's read on. A sickly light. There's light, But this light is not a bright one, it's a beautiful one, it's sick. There is a sickly light like yellow tinfoil, the color is yellow. The writer is creating an atmosphere here, and this atmosphere will be of service to the purpose of writing. Let's read on. The yellow tinfoil was slanting over a high wall, or the high walls into the jail yard. This was a jail, and this is where the officer worked. We were waiting outside the condemned cells, a row of sheds fronted with double bars like small animal cages. There are condemned people in the jail, and we'll learn after that that there is an execution. One condemned man, let's say one criminal, is sentenced to death, and he was going to be executed. There were the cells of the prison, of the jail, and there was a row of sheds fronted with double bars, the bars there, like small animal cages. So the whole atmosphere is about something that's not good, no freedom, it's cages, and there's the sickly light, the sodden morning of the rain. The whole atmosphere says the writer doesn't like what's going on. Each cell measured about 10 feet by 10 and was quite bare within except for a plank bed and a pot of drinking water. In some of them, brown silent men were squatting at the inner bars with their blankets draped round them. These were the condemned men, due to be hanged within the next week or two. So here some men are condemned and waiting to be hanged. Now this paragraph 1, if we read on the whole story in the book, we will discover that this writer has a point of view. We read the story and we discover that there isn't simply a story about condemning and about killing, but there is a point of view concerning the writer, saying, but not in clear words and not in a direct manner, that capital punishment should be banished, should be prevented, should be banned. Of course, he's talking about certain situation in Burma. The person who is going to be hanged is a criminal, and we don't know about the details, what crime he committed. But from reading the story, we feel very strongly that the writer is against hanging this man, showing us that what they are doing is an inhuman act. Nobody is sympathetic with this person, and the whole atmosphere is really very ugly. We may think that the writer says that maybe this man, who is considered a criminal, may not be a criminal in different situations, if the situation is not a colonial one, if it is not the British who are in the authority in Burma. These are things that are not discussed, but we feel that the writer says, I can't approve this kind of hanging. We feel this is wrong. Now, this is a point of view. We can discuss this point of view and we say whether capital punishment should be applied or not, but in this case of Burma, we say maybe the writer is saying about this particular case in the colonial situation. However, what is interesting to us now is this: there is a point of view. A reader, again, who is a beginner, will read the first line saying, it was in Burma, a story. It was raining. It was really very sickly. Things were ugly. And then we took the man. Nobody sympathized with the man, and the doctor came and examined the situation and say what we are going to say. And there was the gallows man, and then we put them there, and then we killed the man, or we hanged the man. After this we went back, everybody went to wherever they want to go. And you say this is a story, simply a story about a hanging, and it is not. If I read the adjectives like sodden, the adjectives like sickly, I know the man does not like what's going on. Does this mean that I can say a point of view without actually saying it? Yes, without saying it in words. I don't have to say, I disagree with the idea of capital punishment. I do not like the idea. I don't have to say that. But I can simply describe a situation where a person is hanged, and I show my feelings through the adjectives, through the events, the situation. One thing that happens in the story is that nobody sympathized with the man who's going to be hanged, except for a dog. A dog jumped around and went to the man, started licking this man. Then they said to the dog, go away, and they made the dog go away. But we learned something. The dog here shows sympathy, and the humans were incapable of showing sympathy. Of course, people would say, but this is a criminal. But how do we know he's a criminal? Maybe he's not. And the writer intentionally withholds the information of this person doing what? Now, we learn this by reading. We take the short story or this essay, it's written something like 7 pages or so, and read it carefully. And while reading, we try to actually taste it. Not to look at the meanings of words, and we say, the man is walking. They took the man, they put the man there, and they killed the man, and that's it. No. How did he describe the man? How the man walked? The man was walking, he was going to be killed, and he, of course, a man in this state would not care about how his clothes could be wet from the puddles of water in the area. He was walking, and there was water in front of him, and he would try to avoid the water and move sideways, as if he's going to live. He didn't feel that he is dying and nothing matters anymore, and then he would step in the water because he's dying after minutes. But the man was full of life. Sorry, he was alive. He was full of life at that moment. And the dog was jumping around full of life. Now, he was pondering, this officer, without saying it, about the idea of life and death, and how humans could end the life of another human. They are not gods. God can do that, but man cannot do that. How can a man end the life of another man? Especially when there are circumstances where suspicions are raised. Maybe this man is not really a criminal. So, my reading here of the short story is not reading of events in a mechanical way. They took him from here, they put him there. No, I'm reading the adjectives. I'm reading the manner things are described. I'm reading the details, sometimes the insignificant details. I put them all together, and then I discover that this writer wants to say that capital punishment should not be allowed. Here, I have a story. It's in the past, all through in the past tense, telling a story, but it's very clearly an argument. So that's what we need to learn to do. We can write stories like these, just for the practice at least, and we should have a point of view that's implied within the story. Sometimes we not do it this way, not like George Orwell. We don't have this talent, so we can do it in a direct manner, as in the story we wrote at the beginning, like saying that I had a letter saying that my uncle was sick, then I couldn't go and visit him, etc. At the end I say, here we don't think of what we have until we lose it. This is not talented. This is very direct, and we can start with this direct manner. We don't have to write, of course, like George Orwell, but we learn from George Orwell, we learn how to read. And we know that when we are writing arguments, that these arguments can be written in different ways. And we'll see how other writers use different methods. The method used by George Orwell here is using a story from beginning to end, and never stating the thesis, never saying directly, this is my thesis. We'll see other writers doing that, or something similar to that. Other writers will write a number of smaller anecdotes, smaller stories. Will write just a paragraph in the format of narrative, and then move back to writing an argument in direct prose. There are varieties and varieties. But when I read the one by George Orwell, I learn how a narrative can be written, pure narrative, which has an argument implied. Now we move on. In the next example, George Orwell writes an essay using the narrative method. Nevertheless, this is not a short story or a novel. It is an argument against capital punishment. Of course, we need to read the whole thing in the book, and we see that this George Orwell essay is an argument, although it's a story, against capital punishment. Capital punishment is the death sentence. We can say that it is like this in general, or, as we say here, in the context of a colonized country. So he's against capital punishment, either in general, or in the context of a colonized country, in a colonized country. That is Burma under the British occupation. From the first line to the last, the whole text is pure narrative. Pure narrative only makes a story. There is no commentary, and there is no moving from one narrative to another, just a story. No commentary. No turning to the present tense and using the argumentative or expository method. not saying I believe in this, I believe in that, this is the point of view, or even giving us facts. This is pure narrative, and this is one variety, of course. We can write others. The unaware reader may miss the whole point. The reader who does not look into things like these, the ones we're talking about, may think it's simply a story. Now we need to consider something else. Now consider Isaac Asimov's text starting page 50. Another text in the book, and we need to read it carefully. Let's see the beginning of the text, of course, not the whole thing. Paragraph 1. When I was in the army, and this I is Isaac Asimov, and he is a scientist and is very intelligent. He was a professor at the university. At the same time, he wrote science fictions. Let's see what he says. When I was at the army, I received a kind of aptitude test that all soldiers took, and against a normal of 100, I scored 160. No one at the base had ever seen a figure like that, and for 2 hours they made a big fuss over me. It didn't mean anything. The next day I was still a private with trivial duties. This is not, of course, the narrative or the essay by Isaac Asimov. This is only the introduction. In the introduction we know something from the word when at the beginning to the word duties. This is simply pure narrative. He's telling us about an event when he was recruited by the army. He was in the army at the time of war or so, and at the beginning they give him a test, an aptitude 1, to measure his intelligence, and he had 160 over 100. He is much more intelligent than the ordinary person. Most people are 100 when we study their IQ. Isaac Asimov got 160. So does this mean that he's really very intelligent? He doesn't comment. He just says, this is what I did. In the base, in the army, they have never seen something like this. This figure, this number, 160, they have never seen something like it. So they said, wow, this is a great, intelligent person. They made a big fuss over him. However, he stayed as a private. A private means an ordinary soldier. And nothing changed. He was a private with trivial duties. But we need to read the whole thing and we see what happens after this. This is one event, one episode. Later on, he comments on that, and then he says, this does not mean that I'm really very intelligent. It means only that I can do the tests well. Since I'm a professor at the university and I know about scoring the IQ tests and these things, since I know language well and I know mathematics and such things, I am familiar with these ideas, I know a lot about theories, I looked as if I'm really very intelligent, but I don't consider myself really very intelligent like that. And then he uses another episode. He tells us another story. And we'll see how this happens. Note the number of smaller narratives. When you read this, of course, in the book, and we'll see other things, we'll discover a number of smaller narratives. How? This writer, after talking about the army, he says, on a certain day, I had a problem in my car, so I could not fix it. I went to my car mechanic, and he fixed this for me. I know about cars, but he knows better, something like that. And then my car mechanic tested my intelligence. He gave me a puzzle and I couldn't solve it. My car mechanic is more intelligent than I am when we come to solving cars or practical things. So I'm not really very intelligent unless it is in tests and things that are done in language and, let's say, in mathematics. But when I use my hands and do something practical, I'm less intelligent than a man who is considered much less intelligent than I am. If I read the text by by Isaac Asimov, I discover that he wants to tell me something. There is intelligence in academic sphere, intelligence in writing and reading, intelligence in taking intelligence tests. People who are familiar with these things. This is theoretical knowledge. But we come to real life, there is another kind of knowledge, practical knowledge in different fields. Some people can be intelligent in this sphere, but not in many others. Some people could be intelligent in reading theoretically about things, but they cannot do things with their hands. There might be even exaggerated examples about persons studying something at the university for years and years, like agriculture, and they really excel in that. They get degrees from the university, and then they have a patch of land and they don't know what to do with it. They have a farmer who is illiterate, and this farmer who is illiterate can, in certain spheres, outwit them, can be more intelligent than these persons who studied at the university. But of course here it means that they have been studying books and have been taking lectures and not practicing this kind of knowledge. Usually at universities they study these things, agriculture, in the field. But if somebody studies these things in books, this person can score highly in tests and then fail miserably in real life. It's an idea of the writer. In order to tell us this idea, the writer did not talk in the manner I'm talking now, or did not give us statistics and numbers and ideas and theories. The writer used smaller narratives in one article. And of course we need to go back to the book and read that. In this book, at least he gave 2 stories or 3 stories in one text. There are 2 different ones. One with the car mechanic, one with a person in a shop giving him a puzzle, a third one in the army. These are 3 pieces of narrative that are in the past tense, but the essay itself has got other paragraphs in the present tense where the writer comments on these ideas. How is this essay different from the one of George Orwell? George Orwell uses pure narrative in our essay here. It's pure narrative from beginning to end. It's one story that starts with the beginning, the middle, the end, and finishes as a story. And then we understand the argument because it is implied. Isaac Asimov gave us one little narrative, then commentary, explanation, and then another narrative from another place, doesn't continue the same story, and then commentary, explanation, and then a third narrative, and then commentary again, explanation. Of course, Isaac Asimov has got an argument similar to the argument or the idea of an argument in the narrative of George Orwell. The argument of Asimov is that intelligence is not only in books, but it's also in life. Both are important. But he does not explain that with one narrative like George Orwell, but with commentary and a number of narratives. So we have a number of smaller narratives with commentary to do that. Other writers will do other things, and other things, varieties are so many. But we have learned things today about how we write a narrative and how we make this narrative carry a point of view, either in a direct, simple manner or in a very subtle manner like in George Orwell. And we have learned another thing, that narrative doesn't have to be pure narrative, but we can have narrative and commentary at the same time in one essay, if this is meant to be an essay, not a work of art. Now, let's see what we can write upon when we write these narratives. We'd like to talk about things like, for example, people campaigning against smoking. If we are asked to write a narrative to deal with this subject, how can we write this narrative? Of course, usually you don't have this in exams because it needs a little bit of thinking, creativity, of trying and trying again and again. But just for the practice and learning the elements of writing, we need to, just for a little while, devote some of our time to writing narratives. But at the end of the course, we'll say that our focus is the argument in a direct manner, because this is the direct one, or the direct method that can be used by all the students writing in a limited span of time. So the argument in a direct manner is our focus, our general aspect. But we need to learn this one too in order to make our knowledge of writing complete. So we will try to write narratives. For example, we take this idea of smoking. How can we write a narrative to convince people that smoking is really very dangerous? People can use different manners of development of their essays. And this is a question we usually ask when you have a text that we read, and then we ask about the thesis of that text and the manner of development. So now we talk about the manner of development. Writers can develop their ideas in different ways. One of them is a narrative. But let's see more. Suppose I want to make an advertisement. I want to make an advertisement advertising a detergent for cleaning clothes. I can use thousands of methods to do that, but let's think of 2 or 3 major ones. One way to advertise my detergent, my soap, that will be used in washing clothes, is to do this, to use expository writing, expository presentation. I talk about facts. I use a number of facts, usually scientific ones, with the statistics and numbers and quotations from scientists. And then I talk about how this particular detergent is good for cleaning clothes. I talk about the ingredients of my detergent. I talk about experiments that were run on this detergent. Then I could give numbers and statistics and the results of tests on clothes. I use scientific English, and if this is on the TV, I put on a white coat and maybe there's a microscope in front of me and a bit of some tubes, and everything here is the scientific method of presenting a subject. Now, this is expository in form, it's analysis, but maybe there is a hidden argument that this detergent is better. The writer here will not say directly, my detergent is better than the others, because this will be a direct argument and most people will not accept it. But maybe the speaker here, the presenter, or the writer of the essay that's an advertisement, will use this kind of method, expository writing, just stating facts about this particular detergent, numbers, and so on. This will convince people that this is good. So there is exposition of facts, there is analysis, presentation of facts here, and there is a hidden argument behind it. My method of development here, how I developed my essay, is by using scientific facts, by using academic analysis, etc. Then there comes another advertiser who will advertise the same product, the same detergent. The other advertiser will say the older advertisement that used scientific facts and so on only convinced a very small number of people. Those people who like to read scientific articles, those people who use their brains in a rational manner, those people who are highly educated, etc., etc., and these people don't watch television and don't see this kind of advertisement. Now, I have another kind of audience. My audience are entertained by music and dancing. So, instead of using the scientific method of presenting facts for people who will not listen to me, I know my audience will listen when there is song or singing and dancing and colors, lots of colors and movement on the screen, beautiful pictures, and nothing scientific at all. This is an argument. The writer, the advertisement will say, this detergent is really very good, or the best one. But we do this within a song and a dance and some kind of pictures, beautiful picture in the background and movement. Now, this is an argument saying this detergent is good, but the method of developing the argument, or the method of developing the text presented, or the program, is not the scientific one, is not the expository one, but using entertainment. Can we use another one? We see here now that we can have the same idea when you express it in different ways, and this idea, we're advertising it. We can use a narrative. In the cinema, on the television, we'll use drama. We'll dramatize things. We'll bring people talking about the product. And someone says to the other, why don't you use this one? And this other one is a problem. And there are men involved in women and children and story going on. And then after the story finishes, we understand that this kind of detergent is the best. The intelligent advertiser knew that the audience would like drama, would like a film, episodes of a film, people talking with one another and so. People like real life people, not scientists talking from the high tower using scientific terminology and nobody listening to them. So on the TV, the advertisement here will bring us drama. The drama here on the TV, in writing, it will be the narrative. People will read the narrative or see the drama and will be convinced that this product is the best. Of course, the narrative that's geared towards that's written in a manner that will say that this product is really good. What does this have to do with our writing? When I have an argument, I can write this argument in different ways. One way of writing the argument, and this was our lecture today, is to write it in the format of a narrative. So now we understand, we're not writing a narrative because we are entertaining people, like the small piece of drama on the TV that's advertising a particular detergent. I'm writing this story not because I am an entertainer, not because I'm a writer of drama, or am I writing this for people to enjoy themselves reading it. This is a good idea, but this is not what the argument is. I'm using the method of the narrative as a manner of developing my argument. I could have developed my argument by giving facts, and I can develop my argument by using a story. And the story will tell people that this thing is good or this thing is bad. Smoking is so dangerous and could kill people. Stating scientific facts about that may not convince most people. Putting this in a drama and showing how a person that people love or so died because of cancer of the lung caused by smoking will convince a large number of people, because this is more emotional and people will be convinced more by that. If I do this in writing, what I write is what? I write a story about a person smoking cigarettes or so, a young person, let's say, and then being loved by everybody, doing a lot of work for people, and everybody appreciates that person, and one day this person drops dead. Why? Lung cancer that was really very dangerous and ate this person up. And then we are really very sad because we lose people we love, people who can be a good asset for the society, to cancer and to smoking. A good writer could do this sometimes to convince people. So we know now I can write a story about smoking with some suspense in it, with something that will allure people to read. And at the end, when I read the story, I will learn that this is really very dangerous. Now, let's say more about how we can develop things in a different way, because this is about reading. We read text and we write an essay. When we read text, we are asked questions about how this text is written as an essay. So in this essay exam, we write an essay and then we read text, and when we say, what is the thesis here? How is the manner of development in this text? I said the narrative is one of them. Let's see others so we can know what it means. Writers can develop their argument by using comparisons. They compare two writers. They compare two people. They compare two countries to show that there is an argument. For example, an essay written about David Irving, and Pamuk, the Turkish writer, Orhan Pamuk. The writer had an argument. The argument was that in Europe, sometimes, in certain parts, there is no real freedom of speech when it concerns particular issues. Freedom of speech is not for all, or not in all issues. And the writer has a title for the essay saying, is freedom of speech for all or not at all? There's a problem here. Why give a person the right to speak freely but not the other? The writer here is accusing Europe of being prejudiced against certain people, allowing some people to say whatever they want to say and not allowing others. This is a point of view. This point of view could be said in an expository manner, giving us facts and details and so on, and could be done in the narrative manner by telling a story and we see what happened to a particular person. It could be done by comparison. How? This essay on Irving and Pamuk tells us about two writers. Irving is a historian and Pamuk is a novelist, and how there were problems concerning the two writers. One of them wrote against Turkey, or the idea of Turkishness, let's say, because they accused him of being prejudiced against Turkishness. He talked about the massacres that happened to Armenians in the history of Turkey. And another writer, David Irving, talked about the Jews and about the Holocaust, and he underestimated the Holocaust. He said it was not so big as that. Now, people in Europe were angry against the two writers, but they prevented Irving from talking. They actually arrested him in Belgium, and there was a sentence against him, a court of law sentence against him, against Irving. But concerning Orhan Pamuk, they didn't punish him in any way, and actually they rewarded him after that, and he was accepted worldwide and in Europe as a great writer. So one writer said something negative about Turkey and nobody was angry with him. Some writers said something negative about the Holocaust and everybody was angry against him, and especially one particular court in Europe. The writer here used this kind of comparison to write an argument. He could have told the story of Irving and it could have been a narrative with a point of view. Thank you.